When K-pop fans woke up one day and found hundreds of their K-pop songs missing from their Spotify playlists, they knew that something was up. And that major something was a big dispute between music giants Kakao M and Spotify. So this major dispute happened for about 12 days, from February 28th, 2021 to March 11th, before the two sides sat down and got an agreement done. While yes, I know this is old news to K-pop fans, I still think we can learn a lot about this event because there's a lot of details that went under the rug, or I felt that was misconstrued by a lot of K-pop fans, particularly in the West. And let's not forget that when this first went down, there were so many K-pop fans that were just going crazy, and they were thinking about getting another music subscription or ditching Spotify altogether. All that being said, we're going to revisit the 12 days that went down between Kakao M and Spotify. Who's really the bad guy in all this? And why did the two super giants just go into a music war? So let's get into it. How did this happen? How did so many songs from Spotify one day just disappear? So imagine this, you're listening to some IU, and in one day, it's missing. No more IU on Spotify. Well, the answer goes back to the beginning of February of 2021. At that time, Spotify moves into Korea for the first time. They wanted to provide their service to Korean music listeners. This is huge, as this will be the first time Spotify could be accessed within the country. They'll also compete against Korea's largest music streaming apps, including, of course, Kakao M's Melon. It's safe to say that K-pop has exploded outside of Korea. There's been about 41 billion K-pop streams since K-pop's first appearance on Spotify in 2014. K-pop's one of the most popular genres on the Swedish platform. So now, Spotify wanted a piece of the Korean domestic market. And while Spotify is a music streaming provider, Kakao M is a bit different. Kakao M not only houses their music streaming app Melon, but is also a full-blown music company. They have a slew of artists under them, a talent agency, have several music labels, and one of the largest co-producers for other labels' music. But Spotify was quite bold in moving into Korea without securing any of the rights to the Kakao M artists. And some of these artists include Epic High, IU, Mamamoo, and Zico. So as the Swedish music giant is moving into Korea, Kakao M, which is the largest music streaming site in Korea under their app Melon, didn't take kindly to Spotify moving in. Kakao M wanted to defend their territory, wanted to defend Korea, because Korea was one of the last major music markets that was not dominated by Spotify. And this is really big because Spotify wanted to provide their app to Korean users. So while in February, Spotify is trying to establish its hold in Korea, by the end of that month, they would hit into a big problem. The rights to any Kakao M K-pop songs would not be renewed. And this would be huge for international fans since, well, they can't listen to their own songs anymore. But rather than a clear story of why they couldn't get an extension done, both had this he said, she said game going on. Kakao M would accuse Spotify of trying to get an exclusive deal, a separate deal, in Korea as opposed to the international countries, pretty much meaning that Spotify would try to get this lucrative deal in Korea that would be separate from the other 170 countries that it served. Spotify, on the other hand, claimed that they were trying to hammer out a deal since a year and a half ago, but that Kakao M didn't want to go to the negotiating table, and that Kakao M was also trying to get an exclusive deal in Korea that would be very lucrative to Kakao M itself. To break this down a bit easier, Kakao M wanted their K-pop songs on Spotify to be available globally except Korea. This is so they're not taking traffic away from their own platform, Melon, domestically inside Korea. Spotify in turn says, we do our deals concurrently, basically getting the same rates internationally or in Korea. Yet if Kakao agreed to this, then they would lose a lot of revenue and traffic inside Korea. They'd stand to lose a decent market share to Spotify. Kakao M knows that their artists are extremely popular and listened to a lot on Spotify. Spotify, of course, knows that K-pop is also a big business. Kakao M is thinking, if the current system isn't broke, let's just keep it. If Kakao had to get a new agreement done, they wanted an exclusive deal with much better perks from the rest of the other countries. Some might call Kakao M gatekeeping, but honestly, it's really business, much like how Spotify is trying to do so as well, by trying to get a streamlined agreement with Kakao M in line with the rest of the countries. And don't worry, we'll talk about my issues with both companies and the truth a bit later in this video. Thus, a showdown between Kakao M and Spotify. So as negotiations broke down in late February, K-pop fans know what happened next. Kakao M would remove a slew of songs from Spotify. K-pop fans would soon get mad and wonder what was going on. It was reported during that time that hundreds of artists would be taken off during that time, with a staggering 5,300 K-pop songs being removed from Spotify. From there, international fans started paying close attention what was happening to Kakao M and Spotify. And while this was going on, Epic High frontman Tablo chimed in by saying this: "Why is it always the artists and the fans that suffer when businesses place greed over art?" And that's a really good question, because artists just want to have their music out there and have fans listen to it, get some exposure, and of course make some money off it. And with K-pop fans, they just want to listen to their favorite K-pop songs with ease. So while this was going on, a lot of K-pop fans were thinking about getting another music platform, as I mentioned earlier, because they wanted to access those missing K-pop songs that were now missing from Spotify. But the Spotify Kakao M dispute would go just past K-pop. This would make national news and even make it internationally. And this would also shake up the music streaming world. So a big point on why this dispute was so contested is that the music streaming business is huge, and it's really not going away. It's like a multi-billion-dollar business. You have 400 million people that use music streaming as of 2020. 5 years ago, back in 2015, there was about 76.8 million people using music streaming services. So from 2015, you had 76.8, and in 2020, you have 400 million people using music streaming. That's incredible. But you know, it makes so much sense, because when's the last time you bought a single or an album, like a physical copy? I buy a physical copy every once in a while, but I usually just stream things or go on YouTube. And I'm sure you're the same. I feel that music stores are becoming more obsolete. And when I last visited Korea, I had a hard time finding music stores. It's not that easy anymore. People would rather pay that $9.99 to Spotify to access tens of thousands of songs on the fly. And to further show that music streaming is huge, Kakao M recently reported that they made 93.9% of their revenue through music streaming services, but only 5% from physical albums. So as it stands right now, we got Spotify, the Swedish music streaming label that has pretty much the entire world under its thumb. And then you have Kakao M with Melon that has Korea, and maybe some overseas Koreans that use the platform. But it's not just Kakao M's Melon that's in Korea. You have things such as Genie, Flow, Bugs, Naver Vibe, and Sorry Bada to compete against Kakao M, because all these music streaming services know that the money is there, that to push K-pop and Korean music, you have to be on a streaming service. So with music revenue just exploding in recent years using music streaming, it's no wonder that Spotify and Kakao M got into a huge dispute over this. Now the next question: why didn't Kakao M and Spotify just get a new agreement? If I had to say the truth and give an educated guess, I think that both companies are just trying to play business with each other. They're trying to undercut each other, get the best deal, as well as ego playing a huge part. And ego is one of the biggest things in the music world that you'll encounter. And for anyone that's worked in business or marketing, you guys definitely know what I'm talking about. So here's what I'm thinking, what both companies thought. So Spotify, I felt that they were prepared to lose Kakao M's library of K-pop songs. And yes, it would sting. But Spotify being, well, Spotify, knew that they can take the hit. I mean, for one, Spotify has 345 million people using their platform in over 170 countries. And Spotify also knows that K-pop fans also like other forms of music, such as, say, American music or Latin American music. So they were banking that they wouldn't cancel their subscription to Spotify just because some of their K-pop songs are missing. They would probably get another music platform in addition to their Spotify account. Not to mention, Spotify still had a lot of K-pop songs on their platform. Any of the big three or Big Hit Entertainment, they would still be on the platform. So you can still listen to BTS or your favorite SM, YG, and JYP artists. Spotify was probably also thinking that fans can also go to YouTube and watch music videos of the missing songs. So I felt that Spotify thought about all this and said, we can take the hit, fans will still stick with us. Kakao M, on the other hand, knew that they couldn't let Spotify run around in their backyard forever. They had to confront them eventually. And while Spotify is big in Korea, they know that Spotify and YouTube are probably the biggest growth factors of why K-pop exploded internationally. So it's estimated that Kakao M's usage is about 8.81 million people. But when you compare it to Spotify's 345 million people in over 170 countries, it's just a losing battle. Now here's the thing that I found pretty weird. In the beginning, the vast majority of K-pop fans sided with Spotify and started blasting Kakao M, starting just putting them down. But don't be fooled. The truth is that both are bad guys and got their hands dirty. For one, when Spotify and Kakao M couldn't reach an agreement, the K-pop songs were removed immediately, without any warning from either Kakao M or Spotify. Now, why wasn't there a warning from either company if they couldn't reach an agreement? If they knew days in advance or even a week in advance that they weren't going to reach one? Many K-pop fans overseas just blasted Kakao M without knowing the business behind a song's removal. They thought, what the hell? Why aren't my songs not on Spotify anymore? It has to be Kakao M's fault. And as stated earlier, both are trying to just protect their business, their brand, and their profit. Yet I'm thinking when Spotify heard that the international community were mad at Kakao, I felt that they fed off that, as that made Spotify look good in the process. This international pressure would put more heat on Kakao M to get back to the negotiating table. Also, there's been some rumblings that Kakao M only wanted to take out their Korean songs from Spotify Korea, not Spotify International. Kakao M was cool with their songs being on all Spotify countries, not just Korea's. And it's also a possibility that Spotify may have just took out all of Kakao M's songs from all the Spotify country versions, spiting both Kakao M as well as the fans and artists under Kakao M's umbrella. Again, playing up to the international fans by blindly getting mad at Kakao M. Both countries are huge in their respective areas, Spotify in the world and Kakao M in Korea. Both can essentially gatekeep each other out of other regions, and this is what Kakao M is trying to do to Spotify in Korea, and what Spotify can do to Kakao M if it were to expand to, say, the US. From all this, as Tablo said, the artists and fans got hurt the most. Both companies were trying to assign blame to one another publicly, when I felt that they should have released a public statement taking responsibility for each company's actions and say that they're taking care of it backstage. So unless one side is completely guilty of axing the original agreement renewal and shows evidence of that, I'm thinking that both are quite guilty. Now after hearing this, you can argue that it's perhaps maybe Kakao M's fault 70% and Spotify's 30%, or vice versa, or somewhere in the middle, 50-50. Or that you're unconvinced and you still blame either Kakao M or Spotify completely. That's up to you to decide who's the bad guy in this dispute. But I do want to urge K-pop fans, especially international ones, to understand the full extent of the dispute, rather than just picking sides on the first day of the news. I want K-pop fans to look at things from a more business and profit perspective, as slimy as it could be, because in most cases, these aspects are exactly how companies operate. While I fully believe that Kakao M prioritizes their Korean fans over their international community, they didn't want to catch the wrath of international K-pop fans either, and they wanted to grow K-pop further overseas. It was a lose-lose situation for Kakao M to not have their artists on the Spotify platform for any length of time, and they had to do something to save face. And in the back of their mind, I think that Spotify knew this. And they knew they had to get back to the negotiating table. And that's what they did. So now we're on March 11th, 2021, the final of the 12 days when Kakao M and Spotify reached an agreement. And yes, Spotify is here to stay in Korea. And of course, Kakao M's music came back to the Spotify servers and now available to all the international K-pop fans. Well, I do really think at the end that both egos got bruised a bit. They came back together and they got something done. And while we don't know the details, I'm assuming that Spotify gave Kakao M a decent cut, a much better profit share for Spotify entering the country. And if that's the case, Kakao M achieved its objective there because they wanted better revenue sharing in the end as well. So unless Spotify or Kakao M gives us the exclusive details and makes it public, that's what I'm assuming. So that was the breakdown and my thoughts on Kakao M and Spotify. What do you guys think about this video? I'd love to know your take in the comments below. Two other things to mention. If you want real talk with no fluff on how the K-pop industry actually works, then please grab my free ebook by signing up for the email list below. And if you like what we do here at Popstory, then please consider supporting us on Patreon. It's not necessary, of course, and we're honored if you just watch our videos. But for those that do support us on Patreon, we have some cool perks waiting. And I'll see you in the next video. Take it easy, everyone.